Thank you for joining us today. I'm Joanna DeMott, UNCW's Office of Military Affairs Military Program Coordinator, military spouse, and all-around military family advocate. I'm so pleased to be joined by Lindsay Church, the Executive Director and co-founder of Minority Veterans of America. Lindsay served in the Navy as a linguist from 2008 to 2012 under the now defunct Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. Lindsay attended language school at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, where they studied Persian Farsi. In 2012, they were medically retired and returned home to Seattle, Washington. Upon returning home, Lindsay attended the University of Washington, where they obtained a BA in Islamic Studies and an MA in International Studies with a focus on the Middle East. Lindsay began their work with veterans in 2014 and has since worked in higher education, traditional veteran service organizations, congressional advocacy, and more. Despite taking great pride in their work, through the years, they noticed that there were many people being left out of the conversation within veteran community service and advocacy. In 2017, Lindsay resigned her post as the commander of an American Legion post to, along with co-founder Catherine Pratt, start the Minority Veterans of America, an organization dedicated to creating community, belonging, and advancing equity for our nation's most underserved and underrepresented veteran communities, veterans of color, women, LGBTQ identifying, and non-religious minority veterans. That was a mouthful. Thank you guys. How are you today, Lindsay?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Super excited that you can join us and grateful for that as well. So Lindsay and I are just going to chat for a little bit, and then afterwards, we'd love to hear all of your questions. All right. I just like to dig right in. So we're just going to dig in. And I'm sure our audience would like to know the origin story of MVA.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit about myself and how I came to this place. But like you said, you read my bio. So, a little more to that story. So I'm a third generation Navy veteran. My mom served, my grandfather served, both were Navy. We have some folks that were in the Air Force. We don't really talk about it very much. But I love all my Air Force folks. But it's a little family running joke. But my mom served in the Navy. I ended up serving in the Navy myself. One, I felt a deep sense of purpose to serve after 9/11. In addition, my mom, being a military veteran herself, went to school through the GI Bill. Myself, I had the option of, my mom wasn't going to pay for school, it wasn't able to, and told me, like, if you want to go to college, you're going to need to find a way to do that. For me, the sense between the sense of purpose and knowing that military was in our family, and wanting to be able to go back to school when I got done, I ended up joining the Navy in 2008. I served as a linguist, so I was a Persian Farsi linguist. I was in about a year at the Defense Language Institute, which is a really cool school down in Monterey. They teach you college level everything within 6 to 12 months, which is wild to me, but it's an awesome school. I loved being in the Navy. I really enjoyed that sense of belonging and sense of purpose. I'm gonna mute Brad from UNCG. About a year in, I really love to do everything. So I volunteered for everything. I literally volunteered 400 hours in 1 year because that's just what I do. So about a year in, I was doing physical training and I started to have really bad chest pain. That was to the point where it was radiating down my left arm only. And so I ended up going to the doctor. The doctor told me that my sternum was inverted, which I knew from birth, but I didn't know how bad it was. My sternum was 7 centimeters from my spine. There were 7 centimeters of space between the bottom of my sternum and my spine. So one chamber of my heart was able to contract but not expand. So I was immediately pushed into a medical process. I had a surgery that by a doctor who had never done it before. He was a flight surgeon, so he ended up not doing a very good job. My first time in the hospital, I spent 30 days in the hospital. My lung collapsed, my liver was enlarged. I literally, anything that could go wrong absolutely did. And so I spent 30 days in the hospital and sent me on a medical journey of now 8, soon to be 9 surgeries. I don't have any cartilage in my chest. I'm missing 4 ribs. I have been through a lot of hell. So about a year or so, in 4 years, in 2012, I was medically retired from the Navy. I was retired 2 years before I was supposed to be. So I was supposed to get out in 2014 and I actually got out in 2012. So here I was basically being pushed to pushed home and had no idea what I was going to do. So I got back to Seattle. Thank goodness my mom is a veteran, so she was able to help me walk through that system and that sort of like figure out how to get enrolled and how to be a medical retiree, in my late 20s. So she kind of showed me the way, but I was very lost. I had no sense of purpose, no sense of belonging. I had lost my whole community and I had no idea like what I was going to do. Thank goodness I was like, I'm going to go to college, I guess, like everybody else. And so I looked at the University of Washington. I was a transfer student. I had my AA from Defense Language Institute. I looked at the transfer application 7 days before it was due. So here I was, I had 7 days to turn in this application and I frantically turned it in. I still don't know why they let me in. Like I literally typed my the answer like in the box. I still don't know what I wrote, like my purpose statements, all of it directly in the box. I have no document. I have no idea what I said, but they let me in. Thank goodness, because I loved being at the University of Washington. So for my first 2 years, I was an undergrad. I really struggled when I got back to campus. I didn't know where I belonged. I didn't know where I fit. I didn't know veterans. Having served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, there's like this fracture in your identity where like you choose between being queer or being a veteran. And at that time, I couldn't figure out which one I was and where I belonged or where I fit. When you live with your whole life, your your home life being a secret, it causes this fracture in your identity when you're out to try to figure out how to navigate those interpersonal relationships. I really struggled to try to find how to be in the world. So for 2 years, I went to school, went home, went back to school, went home. Like I literally didn't talk to anybody. I don't think I made a single friend in undergrad. Yeah, it was wild. Like I, just didn't have a community and I felt so different. Here I was, like there were days when I would go to school and I forgot my medication and have to go home and like tell doctors that, or tell my teachers and my, 19-year-old like classmates, hey, I'm chronically disabled because of my military service. It was like, I felt alien, like everything was swirling around me, but I didn't belong. So I knew I wanted to go to graduate school. So I applied for grad school and I got in, thank goodness. But I also knew that if I was going to make it through graduate school, I couldn't keep doing it. So for me, it was really important to get connected. So I actually ended up starting to work in what was the then Veteran Center. Just processing paperwork, doing VA, like doing all the like collection of all the paperwork. And there I found a community. I found folks that, for all of our flaws, we understood each other. I could go there, I could be myself, I could set like some of these things that I was experiencing down. And I could find others like me. And so this kind of became my place. So over time, I started working with the Student Veterans of America chapter, really dug into diversity and inclusion, trying to figure out how can we turn this from a space where only certain people can exist and flourish to a space where we can all belong and really find that community. So I got together with a group of 4 other people, and we knew that the school was doing a really good job at processing our paperwork. It was not doing a good job of supporting us. And so we put together a proposal to start an office that would do everything, including like processing benefits, but that's only one part of the journey. So we came together, we're like, we want a mental health professional, we want, student programming, we want a space so that people can belong, we want coffee, and we put it together. We said, university, we need you to step up your services. And they listened to us, they listened to us. So, but in 2015, I actually was a part of the group that started the Office of Student Veteran Life at the University of Washington, which is still alive today, serves about 3,000 students on campus every year. So that was my first journey into starting anything. At the same time, I was also working, or I wasn't working, I was volunteering as a commander of an American Legion. Between all of this, I really started to see like there wasn't a place for people like me. And every time that I tried to belong to something, my leadership was like seen and like basically capitalized on, but without allowing me to be who I was. My first night as post commander of an American Legion, I was told, it's okay that you're gay, but you don't need to talk about your wife. So like this is not being, this is being tolerant. This is not being supportive. This is not being inclusive. So I would see this even in young spaces, I would see it in old spaces, I would see it in like traditional VSOs, I would see it in student veteran chapters. It all looked a little bit different, but it was all some form of othering. And it wasn't just me. So my good friend, Dr. Catherine Pratt, is an Asian American woman veteran. She's Korean American. And she also felt that same marginalization. She went to the University of Washington when she was turning in her application. She actually looked up whether or not she counted as a veteran. Because her dad is a veteran, and he, flew airplanes and like did combat missions, and she didn't. And so she actually did not know if she qualified for it. And so between the two of us, neither one of us fit. Her because of being a woman and being a person of color, and me being gender nonconforming or non-binary and queer. But it didn't matter. The marginalization felt the same. The oppression and the like pushing us out of the community felt the same. So we came together and we said, you know what, I will never understand what it feels like to live in your body. I will never understand what it feels like to be a person of color. You will never understand what it feels like to live in a body like mine. And what we can understand is mutual marginalization, and that we understand from a military mindset, when one of us is harmed, we're all harmed. And so there's this funny message between the two of us. We actually started NBA via text message as true millennials. So we sent a text message that has an explicit word or two, but definitely came together and said, I think there's something here. That if we come together and create an intersectional movement of veterans, meaning that we come together with people from multiple minority identities, not just one. We come together and we say, we are all feeling these things, and these are our outcomes. These are the disparate outcomes that we have in common. We don't understand what it feels like to live as each other, but we have our own lived experiences that are all congruent with what we're talking about here. So we came together and we said, we're going to create a mission, and it's going to include veterans of color, women, LGBTQ, and religious and non-religious minorities. Each one of these communities are small when you look at them. The LGBTQ community is only 1 million veterans. The women community is only 2.2, veterans of color 5.5, religious minorities 1.6. You put all these together, even at your maximum amount of people participating in your movement, you're still small. But when you put all of these minority groups together, you're looking at a third to half the community that identifies as something other than straight white Christian male. So how can we take this and turn it into a collective voice? And so that's what MBA is. What we're trying to do is create collective action through people coming together by understanding what oppression and marginalization feels like and fighting against it. So still to date, we are the only intersectional movement of veterans that I know, like minority veterans, and it's working. The collective action and the collective voice is happening. We're seeing change in the community because of that collective action, and that community coming together to say that we're tired of the marginalization, we're tired of the injustice, and we're going to fight against it. That's how we started.
I'm hearing, like, we can't tell the story of MBA without telling your story, without telling Catherine's story. And I can tell you've also been doing this in front of people that have 15 minutes of time, because you can bolt it all out. And that was a lot of information in no time at all. And I'm moving from the script, but you recently gave congressional testimony, which I'm sure was you sound biting that as well. What happened there? What was that experience like?
Yeah, so our first congressional testimony was in May of 2019, talking about women veteran issues on the Women Veteran Task Force. It used to be that, especially before that, most of the conversations about minorities happened in some task force or some subcommittee, or that the issues of our community were relegated to certain places, but not to the full committee. So we had the opportunity. We've testified about 5 times, I think, last year on different issues, but this is the first time. Every year at the beginning of the legislative cycle, they actually bring together all of the major VSOs, so the veteran serving organizations, to come together and say, these are the policy priorities for our organization for the next Congress. And what they do is they actually create the congressional calendar and legislative priorities based off of what they hear in these hearings. So they traditionally go to the 100-year-old organizations, the VSOs, the American Legion, VFW, VVA, PVA, and DAV. So they continue to go to these, and what we're seeing from that is that the policies that are put in place and the legislation that's being passed centers those folks. It forgets folks that are minorities. So this year was the first year that they did it. They included 4 new VSOs. So they included Minority Veterans of America. I'm going to forget some of them. The what is it? National Association of Black Veterans, and 2 other ones that I'm completely spacing. Oh, the National Coalition of Homeless Veterans. So what they did was they brought these minority voices in to say that instead of at the end, when we have these hearings, you're going to come give us information, we're going to formulate our legislative agenda and bring some of these pieces into it. So if you look at the House Veterans Affairs, their legislative agendas and priorities, one of them is creating an inclusive VA, which is all about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so what you see from all of this is that what our voice and the things that we brought to them, the priorities that we brought, are now being heard in Congress. And for me, like I love programming. I love community building. You'll always see me somewhere in like a chapter just trying to like give out food. But when I really look at the problem, right? Like when we really look at homelessness, mental health crisis, anything that's happening in our community, if we don't fix the system and we don't actually take a systemic approach here and say we need to pass legislation and policy that's going to change the outcomes while we do that, we're going to continue to see those things happen. So for me, even though I really just want to be giving out food or like, doing the programmatic aspect, we have to be invested in that legislative action to be able to make sure that things like the trans man can't come back next time that there's a new president, or like there are a million like things about marginalization and justice that we have to fix the system if we're going to have different outcomes on the ground.
Absolutely. Everything, right? That's amazing to see you go from providing this program, and Melanie was nodding her head. She knows we have to provide food for our in our military resource wing there in order to bring people in and then to fight there. But what I heard about your story is that you saw a problem and you went to go try to do whatever you could to fix that, even creating an office, much like the one that Melanie and I work in, and supporting it by with student support. Like that's huge. That's something that I admire about you for sure, is that you don't just see a problem and say, okay, I'm just if that's a problem, you got to fix it. You're like, how can I fix it?
Right.
That's amazing.
I mean, it's really important too. Like I can tell you a problem from a million miles away, like, and I can point out problems every day of the week. But what I found, and I used to do that, like when I first started, I would yell about everything. I promise you, like I was, like, and I still am a true activist, but I was like the early activist, which meant that I was not quite strategic about how I was talking about things. So while I knew the problems, while I knew the things that were happening, I recognized over time that when I came with solutions at the same time, they would start to listen to me. Because they know that we have the lived experience. We see this and we feel it every single day. And so they're looking to us for actual solutions. They know, most people know there is a problem. Most people, even if you want to deny it, are somewhere in you knows that there's an issue when it comes to minority veterans, when it comes to minorities just in the world. But that, like, yeah, just that recognition part, like you can't see it. If you can't see a problem, you can't fix it. So figuring out how to show and expose the problem, but at the same time, give them the solutions so that they're not trying to formulate solutions that are built on without our voices included, because that continues to perpetuate the problem. So I've always been a person that takes these things head on, because at the end of the day, if it's not us, then who? I very much like the Travis Manion Foundation's quote. It's like, if not me, then who? And I think about the next generation of veterans. I think about the folks that fought for me when I served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and I couldn't do anything, right? I think about like one of the biggest reasons why I was so invested in the trans ban and getting it turned over or overturned was I fought and lived under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And I know that somebody was out there advocating for me for that change when I couldn't speak. So now, like, here I am, I have a voice and I have the ability to do something about it. And so I'm going to give every damn thing that I have, excuse my language, I'm a veteran. But I'm going to give everything that I have to be able to make sure that we give the next generation a better community to inherit.
So we talked about how this started, why it started. How did it evolve to where it is today? It started small and then it branched out. How did we get there?
Right. So when we first started, Catherine and I were like, we're going to do this. And so I put out a Google form, and it was like, hey, we don't know what this is going to be yet, But if you're a minority veteran and you feel these things, like, and you want to sign up to join this, like, we'll tell you what it is eventually. We had 40 people sign up in the first day, because people felt this. People felt that, like, they were also being marginalized and they felt outside of it. And so I have this phrase, and my team will tell you it's like such a, I have cheesy lines. I'm so sorry about this. I truly believe that 5 people can change the world. So for me, the way that I lead is that I can't do everything. I don't represent all of the identities that we're representing. So I need to make sure that there are others involved in this. And so we have our first 5, which I consider like our founders. The first 5 sat in my living room and we talked about what are we going to build here. And so we literally, a core group of 5 people started this whole organization. From there, it's always been imperative to me that we continue to build our leadership team. Like, that is the most important thing that we're going to do. We've grown to be 2,200 members in 48 states, 3 territories, 4 countries. We have chapters in Seattle, Richmond, Atlanta, and now Pittsburgh. That wasn't because of me. That was because those first 5 brought in 5 more, brought in 5 more. We have 40 leaders across the country now. We have 2 staff members of all of that. So our whole organization is run by minority veterans who have felt this marginalization and are really, truly invested in changing outcomes for themselves and for everybody else. So we started, like, how did we grow? We grew because 5 people brought in 5 more people, brought in 5 more people. At this point, we're 3.5 years old. We've probably seen 200 volunteers in that time. Every single person and their lived identities and experiences pushed us to a different place. I often say that I'm not going to do this forever. It's being an activist and an organizer, especially under the previous administration for minorities, has been exhausting. And so for me, one day I won't be doing this and somebody else will be doing it. And I hope that it's going to be somebody that has lived experiences that I don't, that can build this organization to be even different and better than I thought it could be. Our organization thrives on innovation, creativity, and being able to really express yourself and your values. I found over time that my volunteers don't come to us because they need resume bullets. They come to us because they need an expression of their values. And that's what MVA is. MVA gives them the opportunity to organize, to be activists, to express themselves across the board in different topics and different causes that are all an extension of who they are. So people come to MVA, and they've continued to come to MVA over the last 3.5 years because they can express themselves and be truly themselves 100% authentically, genuinely, don't have to hide anything. And damn, are they good leaders. When people don't have those, like, things that they're trying to hide or things that they're trying to bury or things that make them different, and when those differences are celebrated, people are so good at leading. You wouldn't believe the talent that I have on my team because they don't have to hide. They just get to be the goofy, funny, broken, in pain, loving human beings that just want a better community. So that's how we grew. That's where we are over 3.5 years.
So 200 volunteers coming in and out, and you said 40 chapters. Is that correct?
We have 4 chapters right now, 40 active leaders. Over the last 3.5 years, we've probably seen about 200 leaders. And that's not even that's just who has led with us. That's not even considering how many folks we've served. We've served thousands of folks over the last few years. Last year alone, some of the things that I'm really proud of, we did a COVID relief fund that we gave out $66,000 directly to the community that were struggling or impacted by COVID. We've distributed food to hundreds of people in Seattle and Atlanta. We have done, like, probably 50 online virtual events to get community connected to each other. We launched our Pittsburgh chapter just at the beginning of this month. We are getting ready to go on we're getting ready to tour 6 cities in 6 months on a supply drop tour, dropping supplies to the community in all 6 cities. So we're moving. We've done a lot. Like our team is really, really awesome. We had an equity, inclusion, and justice summit last year that we had 400 people show up to. It's just really neat. I tell people this often. MVA is not an organization. So like you see veteran serving organizations. I'm not an organization. We are a movement of people trying to create change. What we do is not quantifiable or measurable, but we create culture change. That's our job. We are a movement. And if anybody ever tries to tell you different, send them my way.
And I love how you motivate people by telling them what you're fighting for, right? You're fighting for love.
Yeah. We're fighting for collective liberation is really what it is. Like, we're not fighting for equality here. We're fighting for liberation. And the more people understand what that means, that like our collective liberation is intertwined and that there's always something to fight for, because if we're not all free, like, or we're not free until everybody's free. And that liberation, like, we have to be fighting for liberation, not equality. Equity is going to get us there, but it's not about equality. It's about liberating people from the systems that keep them down and oppress them and marginalize them. Until we're all liberated from these systems, we're going to continue to fight.
Where do you see the organization going in like the next 5 years? Or what would, if you had the best end state to pick in the next 5 years, what would you love to see?
Okay, so the best end state that I can possibly imagine is culture change. I say this pretty regularly. I don't want people to have to belong to MBA. I want them to choose to belong to MBA. I want them to be fulfilled, love being a part. What I want to see is that other organizations have stepped up. Other organizations have changed their own culture so that there are other people that can support minority veterans in a way that's authentic to minority veterans and not harmful. If I had it my way, like, I would watch MBA grow and see what the leaders come up with, because they're absolutely brilliant, and that's literally what I do. But what I really want to see is organizations around the country that are able to truly grow and be responsive to the cultures of the folks that they're trying to serve. So building those organizations and building those communities to be more inclusive so that MBA doesn't have to exist, but gets to exist, that's my dream. And if we can do that in the next 5 years, if we can change culture, if we can change, we're watching it happen in Congress where they're changing the culture about who they even include at the table. Can that happen, and will that happen in the next 5 years across veteran serving organizations and across the community, so that people can stop having negative outcomes? Because MBA's like, we're 3.5 years old. We're a small organization. When you compare like even just our budget size to the bigger organizations, we're like maybe less than a percentage of their budget. Like, we can only do so much with all of that, but we need other organizations to step up and start doing better. So if we can push and push and push for these next 5 years, that's the outcome I want to see. I tell people, like, I want to become a foundation one day, because like I'd rather be giving scholarships than having to like literally drudge through some of the stuff that we have to go through because the community is not inclusive.
And with administrations changing and priorities changing, that had to have been really, really difficult to navigate. And thank goodness you did. And we're glad that you're here today, and you even stood up a new chapter during it all. So there's a lot of us on here from universities. I see a number of different places, but what can we do to support the mission?
So what you all can, I think I just alluded to it. One is changing culture on campuses. I started a student veteran center. I was a part of an SVA chapter. There's a lot of harm happening in those spaces. And so for me, student spaces can really dig into creating cultures that support minority veterans. The number of students I've had say, like, my student veteran center is toxic, or I don't go in there, or, every time I go in there, they're, like, they say these awful things. Like, that's where I think student veteran centers can really lead the charge, is to create these inclusive spaces that actually center and prioritize the needs of minority veterans. I say this often, is that if you can build a culture that supports minorities first, you're more likely to serve the whole a whole lot better. So for student veteran centers, that's one like big thing, is to really change the culture, to create community agreements and standards, and not just let it be a space that's completely like unmonitored and unchecked, because that's where the culture goes bad. This like honor culture that exists within especially the student veteran space is not real. It does not extend, and it's not enforceable. You can't tell somebody you didn't obey the honor code when the honor code isn't written down. So some of those things around creating a culture that's more supportive and positive for minority veterans, that's where you can start. The other parts are join the movement, like tell your students about it. They need a place to belong. Minority veterans are looking and they're craving these opportunities. Send them our way. Tell them that you want, tell them about leadership opportunities, places that they can get engaged. I'll tell you, of the 40 leaders, I probably have maybe 20 of them that are actively doing stuff. Some of them are just there because they want to belong. So send them to places that they know, that you know and recognize that they can get something out of. So if you see a minority veteran that's really struggling or looking for a place to belong, send them our way. You know, like send them to places that they can flourish, because if they're coming to you telling you that it's not a space that they can belong, that believe them. You know, like understand that it's going to take time to change those cultures, but in that time they need to be supported. So you can send your students to us. You know, like send them to virtual programs. We do virtual recovery hours. We're going to be doing economic empowerment programming. We're going to be doing wellness. So keep an eye out, see what we're up to, see where you can plug them into, but also like help them get engaged at other places on campus. Like help them get in. For me, the hardest thing to break down was even being able to go into the Queer Student Center. Like I couldn't. It took everything that I had. Like, and the only reason that I did was because I worked, literally shared a wall with them, and I worked on campus. So it was easier for me to break that barrier down because like I was a staff member. It wasn't the same. But help students get into those spaces and be a part of those communities, because more often than not, they're just scared. They don't know, it's an unknown, and they're afraid that they're going to be othered because they're veterans. But help them get engaged and be involved in those places that will build them up. If they're coming, like I said, believe them. If they're coming to you telling you the space is not inclusive, believe them and help them find a place it is.
I love it. I love it. You've given me so much to think about and analyzing what we're doing at the university. So I would I would encourage everybody who's on from a university to really examine their practices, listen to what Lindsay's telling us, and see if we can't find some really concrete ways that we can make our spaces more inclusive, for sure. So I already think that you're a superhero, right? So if you could have any superhero power, what would you have and why?
I had to think about this one pretty hard actually, because like I want to fly just because I want to fly, but like time travel is definitely it. I am perpetually behind. Like there's so much going on, and like I will always forget something, or I don't have enough time to do something. I want time travel so that I can like go back and finish things that I never got to do because I was like late. So time travel or the power of flight, either one of those would be epic. I really think time travel though, because I'm late a lot. So
Don't tell your Air Force family members that you want to fly. That one.
oh, I mean, yeah, they would have some choice comments.
I would also, I love that. Time travel is, it's a dangerous superpower. We know that, right? Because if
No,
you change anything in the past, we've got problems for the future.
it's
But yeah,
terrifying. Butterfly effect.
you of course would pick the most complicated superpower that you.
Mhm. It's 100% true. Like if I'm going to pick something, it's going to be something weird like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. I would
I mean,
trust.
I would like the power to read minds, but I also don't want to know what people are thinking half the time. So like, I think that's just a slippery slope there.
That would be miserable. But yes, that's really interesting. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Time travel or flying. Flying's pretty cool. There are so many amazing superpowers, and I'm glad that that was a well thought out response. I would trust you for time travel. I'm not sure that I would trust just anybody with that.
Oh, I absolutely wouldn't trust me with it. Don't do it. Don't trust me with that. Don't. That's not a good idea.
So maybe I should get it as well, and we could monitor
Yes.
one another to make sure
We'll
that
just travel together. It'll be fine.
you have to have a time travel partner with that super.
Companion airfare. Love
Never
it.
travel alone. And that could be another motto, maybe.
Right?
And
Never time travel alone.
if you have somebody in your student lounge, bring a buddy when you go someplace. Yeah,
Truth.
absolutely.
That actually is not a bad practice, to be honest.
Right. All right. I've heard really wonderful things about your dance moves. Can you tell me about your team and their specific dancing rituals that they have going on?
Yes. I am a believer in positive culture. If people are going to be working with me and giving me their time, like we have to create a space where they really enjoy it, because otherwise it's just not fair. So we do this thing called Dance Party. So like we actually have a channel now on our Slack channel that's like Dance Party. So people would drop in songs that they're dancing to, or songs that they're singing about. I actually have a Dance Party playlist that people add to. We have a shared playlist.
Oh, cool.
At the beginning of almost every team, like big team meeting, we have a dance party. So we stop like the beginning of it. Somebody will send in their song and we'll actually dance it out. Also, when there's conflict, I like to dance it out. I'm just okay. So the reasoning behind this, I think in social justice movements, oftentimes we think that we have to be like miserable to do the work. And yes, there is a lot of misery in some of this work, but we're fighting for joy. At the end of the day, movement building and social justice is to empower communities to feel joy. And if we as organizers don't feel that joy and aren't able to feel that joy in our fight for liberation, like we're not doing it right. So for me, I try very hard to make sure that my team, if they're giving me their time or even if they're working for me, it needs to be joy here, you know, because there is so much pain, there is so much suffering in our community, and there's so much happening, especially in COVID, that we could all buckle under all of it. And it would be very easy to just curl up and say, I'm not doing this anymore, I quit. That's not the solution, that's not the answer. And so for me, I work my ass off to try to build that positive team culture, to give them that place that they can flourish. You know, I was talking earlier about send them my way. The reason why I say send them my way is that we can give them joy. We can give them that experience of joy. We can help that, like, be a part of that community that helps feed their soul. I want people, like, people aren't going to be volunteers with me forever, but I want them to remember this time, and I want them to know that, like, this was a moment that they felt deep joy in the struggle, because the struggle is the struggle. There's always going to be the struggle, but if we can feel joy while we do it, while we struggle together, while we struggle collectively, we are a stronger community for that, and we have stronger organizers because of it. So dance parties are epic. Dance parties are my favorite thing. I actually have one of my program managers. He's one of the goofiest dudes. Like, he literally like pulls out props and stuff. Like, he'll just like start like a piano in the background. It's hilarious. But we do it usually at the beginning. We usually do it at the end. Sometimes you'll get it like a dance attack in the middle of like a sentence. So it's a really great way to build community and have joy.
And you wouldn't feel too nervous about saying something in a meeting after you've already shown everybody your dance moves too. So those
Right.
conditions are kind of loosened, and you're maybe more apt to speak your mind.
Yeah.
That's great.
I mean, that's the point, right? Like, the point is to say what needs to be said. I am also like a big proponent of like engaging in healthy conflict, and like, you do that through building a team where you trust each other, where you feel comfortable with each other, where you feel like a family. And you feel like you can actually have that conversation in a place that's safe enough that if it doesn't go well, you're still going to be okay. And that's what we're trying to cultivate, because intersectional movement building is challenging. Trying to bring together marginalized identities, especially in a moment right now, like where everybody's fighting to be seen and heard, it's challenging. And so we have to have a place where people can feel like they can be a part, and where they can be themselves, where they can actually have those conversations and that conflict and be safe to do so. Like, that's, if your executive director is the goofiest person around, it usually makes it so that people feel like they can talk and they can be a part without feeling like they are, stuck in a corporate environment where they can't really tell you what's going on.
I love it. Our onboarding specialist had a couple of dance parties that were available to all our staff and faculty, and she did say that it helped to really relieve the stress of some of the pandemic and have some fun, and then also to collaborate across the campus too. It's like, if I've seen you dancing, if I see you in a meeting or I need to know what's going on in your area, I'm probably more apt to chat with you.
I love it.
We might
exactly. I like to send videos. Every once in a while I'll take a video of myself dancing just because, and like send it to them, because like, if I'm goofy and like I can show you my goofy side, but also still go out there and get stuff done and like still be seen as like as an expert in the space, like they also feel like they can too. So it's fun.
That's fantastic. Is there anything else that I've missed in our chat? I'd love to open it up for some questions if our group has any. But is there anything I missed?
I didn't miss anything, but I'm happy to take any questions.
So we've got an okay group here. If you want to unmute and ask your question,
or if you want to dance, let me know.
I'm not there yet.
It's still early. It's almost noon, so.
I am having trouble picturing our office doing a dance party.
Oh my gosh, you just have to do it sometime just to see. You never know, like you might get the best culture out of it. Who knows?
It's true. It's a possibility. But I'm just picturing our director, if I leaped in front of his door and said dance attack. I mean, they think I'm crazy anyway. Everybody does, so. Why not? I don't have anything to
What-
lose.
What are you gonna lose by it? By the way, can I play this song and we can all dance real quick and just see what happens? You never know.
It's true. You never know. Never know till you try.
Hello, Ben Asma from Appalachian State University. And, I just had a question, and this isn't directly say related to our Student Veteran Center, but I just wonder about all the centers on campus and how we are trying to, create that culture change. And wondering when you talk about, incorporating that supportive, those positive messages and processes, that what might be some of those starting places, again, for maybe some of the other centers on our campus that are not there yet, that how do we put those statements, those feelings out there so that, one, people feel supported and accepted, and then also how we begin to challenge those biases that people hold with bringing up that defensiveness that can be so challenging.
Yeah, the defensiveness and the fragility is going to come up. That's the one thing that I'll tell you and everybody that in this work, the defensiveness, the fragility will come up. It's got to be, it's we're not used to it. But one of the things that I always encourage people to start with is community agreements. Oftentimes, like I said, the community spaces are structured around an honor code where we have this expectation that we think that people should abide by. Oftentimes those rules are unwritten, and it allows for a lot of space and ambiguity and a lack of accountability when people cross those boundaries. So a person like myself, when I use they, them pronouns, or I look a little bit different. When I was trying to advocate as a staff member in a veteran center, I was made fun of for pronouns. And I didn't have a sense of recourse. I didn't have a community agreement or standards to say this is unacceptable behaviors. And most spaces are like that. So for me, the very first place that I think everybody should begin with in these spaces is, how do you expect people to abide? How do you expect people to act? And how do you expect people to create that space here? I always say, get the students involved, because the students know best. So you find those folks and you find, you put together a core group of 5 people and you say, all right, these folks are all from different identities. They all have different lived experiences. We have women, we have gender nonconforming folks, we have queer folks, we have people of color. We have this representation. Now, what do we want people to do in this space? And so that core group becomes the people that actually develop your community standards. So it's not a bunch of administrators saying, hey, you're going to do this thing, because students won't go with it. They'll just get mad. But if students create it, guide it with the staff members that actually know what they're doing, obviously, I'm not saying that just you'll end up with weird rules, but I'm saying with staff direction and somebody that actually is an inclusion specialist, get those students together and ask them, what do you want this space to look like? If you, in your ideal dream states, what were the things that you would do? We had a conflict I think it was January 2019, maybe. So we had a conflict among in our organization, and we actually, instead of devolving and falling apart, we decided we were going to come up with member and leader community agreements. And so what we have is membership and leadership rights and responsibilities. So in that section, we're saying you have, in this organization, you have these rights, and these rights are not to be harassed, not to be belittled, not to be hit on, all of these things. And these are your responsibilities in doing that. So everybody has one and the other. If you want these rights, then you also are responsible for making sure that nobody else's rights are impeded on. So it gives people an onus to act better, to be a part of this community in the way that we ask them. And it tells them what they can expect to be treated. So for you, as you look at student centers, is a membership right, or a rights and responsibilities, or a community agreements. Post them on a wall. Don't let them get forgotten. Don't let them go in a book. Don't let them get hidden anywhere. Put them on a wall. There was the Q Center at the University of Washington. They actually came together with a core group of students and came up with their own community agreements. Then they took them and they put them on posters. They made beautiful art out of them, and they were the decoration for the student center. So when things happen, they're actually, this isn't it. You doing that, or you hitting on me, is a violation of that community agreement that says that I can be here without pursuit. So it gives people an expectation, because if they're going to be in these centers, you can't just let it go rampant. And I think with veterans, it's been so hard, because veterans, you can't tell a veteran anything unless you're a veteran. It's just it's a thing that we do. And so veteran centers oftentimes don't have they have a code of honor, but they don't necessarily have agreements or like agreed upon behaviors. And so for me, I always target the like agreed upon behavior in the systems first, because like you can fight the individual doing this thing. Like I've done that over and over again, but if you don't have something to like hold them accountable to, it doesn't really matter. Does that answer your question, Ben?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. Very helpful.
Yeah.
I love that. That's given us so much to think about. We talk about our Seahawk Respect Compact and maybe being able to take that, besides the 11 general orders of a military college student that Melanie developed. That's pretty amazing. But getting that core group, and I love that you say, 5 people can change the world. It only has to be 5 people. And I think in this service, we're always thinking we can't get these huge numbers. It's very difficult. So that's really awesome. Thank you so much.
I started a while back to look at, as opposed to looking at numbers, like oftentimes we get these like small groups, right? Like you get like 15 people and it feels like you didn't really do it. I started to really switch my perspective from numbers and like the like KPIs, things like that, and really started looking at impact. What is the impact I'm making on these folks? Like, am I making a solid impact and a positive impact on 15 people, or am I making no impact on 100? And so that's where I started to really switch my perspective. When you're doing inclusion work, you're probably not going to get 100 people to start with, but 100 people over time, once you show people that this is your core value. Like when people started to realize, when I was working at the University of Washington, when people started to realize our core values were inclusion, yes, we had some friction, but over time that culture change really started to dig in and people started to expect that from our student center.
It looks like Brad wants to say something.
Hi, Brad. Hang on, you're muted.
All right, yeah, just trying to figure out how to
Okay.
unmute myself. I'm still on the phone, but I'm back in my office.
I hate the mute button.
I know, it's crazy. So really, a couple of comments. The fact that you spoke about liberation of oppressed people versus, just something like seeking equality and equity and inclusiveness really spoke to me, and I think will speak to some veterans who may have been more resistant to this kind of activity because of the fact that they can now view it as, the liberation of people. And that is one of the core values and missions of the United States military.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, that's some verbiage that I'm definitely going to start using in our shop. The question that I have is shamelessly selfish, and I'm hoping that you can help me. So say, for instance, there were a person who was planning on doing some research in this very area of intersectionality in college environments. Can you suggest any authors or any research that is extant right now that could be referenced?
Not off the top of my head, but I do have some stuff, materials. So if you can send me your email address, I can send you some stuff. I have some folks that do intersectionality theory. So definitely send me your contact information and I will send you some materials back.
Outstanding. Thank you so much.
Yeah, there's some really solid veterans who have been doing, especially in social work. This is a major area where social workers have been leading the way on intersectionality and intersectional framework. So I have a really awesome Chamorro woman veteran that does intersectionality from a social work perspective that I can probably connect you to as well.
That's great. We do a dialogue around intersectionality, a dialogue group every semester.
That's awesome.
And it's just, there's just so much. The fact that the military and veteran identity is so big, or people tie their identity so much to that, that sometimes the public tends to homogenize vets as this one, group of high and tight white guys who kick in doors. And it's such important work. And I guess just the only other question that I would have is, how do we get our folks involved? Do you have stuff that you can send us that we can push out to our folks that
Yes.
to get them going?
Yes, Joanna, I will also send you some information after the fact, so you can send out. You can find us on minorityvets.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, so Instagram, and Twitter at Minority Vets. So we put out all of our social material, stuff like that. You can also sign up for the organization. We send out updates and things that are happening. But I want to go back to your intersectionality thing, and I remembered something that I found really valuable on campus. It's been a few years since I worked on campus, but when we did this program called Intersectional Identities. This is like before, or like, when intersectionality was just becoming a kind of a more commonly talked about phrase. It was an opportunity to bring together folks around specific minority identities. So we had a women's focused one, we had an LGBTQ focused one, we had a people of color focused one. It gave students voice. There were folks that got a chance to share their identities and their experiences with both the broader campus and with veterans that didn't identify in that way. It was probably one of my favorite programs that I've ever put together. We only got like 25 people to show up to each one of them, but it was honestly one of the most powerful programs that we did on campus, because people really got to share their unique lived identities and experiences. They want to talk. They want to tell you what happens. Like, people really do want to be heard and seen and know that they are valued. And programs like that, where you can prioritize those intersectional and marginalized identities and their voices, like, man, is that a powerful program.
It looks like we are just about out of time. Does anybody have maybe one more quick question in our last 5 minutes?
I'm going to grab some email addresses here, though, while you're at it.
All right. I've got them if you want, Lindsay.
Okay, perfect. That'd be awesome.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. I didn't know where we were going to go with this, and we had some questions, but I love chatting with you and just the wealth of knowledge. I saw you speak at the Student Veterans American NatCon when we were actually in person, and I was just so intrigued. So I'm so happy that you were able to join us today. This is being recorded and will be available. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off, but thank you so much.
Actually,
Thank you all.
I have one question. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So I'm a counselor, and I work with a young identifying female who's getting ready to go into service.
Mm-hmm.
And she's branching into, I'm not going to say just in case, but what she is concerned about being identifies as a lesbian, and she is concerned about what that may be like for her.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts, advice, or at least direction of, say, like you're talking about, resources that I could connect her with prior to this process?
I would highly encourage you to get her connected to MBA before she goes.
Okay.
There's a lot going on in our military, and nobody's unaware of the sexual assault, sexual harassment, othering, the discrimination. We all know that is part of the military. There's also a lot of beauty in the military, so don't get me wrong, but having a place to go and somebody that they can talk to is probably going to be the most powerful and important thing that you do for them. So if there's a way that you can get them connected, even get them to join the organization, follow us on social media, get involved in one of the groups, in whatever way, they need a support network. That's the honest truth, is that it's really challenging to be queer in the military, because we know even sexual assault and sexual harassment are not about sexual gratification, they're about power. And oftentimes LGBTQ folks are more likely to be assaulted. So even just looking at some of the power dynamics, they need a community to belong to, and a place that they can, if something happens, they know that they can get support. So dig in, have them get them connected to Modern Military Association of America, get them connected to MVA. It doesn't matter wherever you get them connected, but make sure that they have that support from a military community, because that's the only group that's going to really understand that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, send them our way. We'll be there. I appreciate you all taking some time. I know that you all are really busy folks, so thank you for taking the time. And honestly, thank you, Joanna, for inviting me. I love that you all are interested in and invested. So thank you for your work. Thanks
for joining us. This has been a great interview, and I know this won't be the last time that we talk. So thank you. Of course not. Thank you.